of the CCH realm of this conversation, at least, because I want to go. You did a little bit with the Express, and then I keep looking at your shirt. I want to know what reach is and stuff like that. But before we get to that, all of that, as we were talking before, I'm not even sure of his last name. But you're going to touch upon the John situation at all? Since here?
Jonathan?
Yeah. Well, I mean, how did that kind of fall out for you? I guess.
So what happened was I have a friend who's a NBA scout with the Minnesota Timberwolves, and his mother was the Canadian ambassador to Tanzania. So he went to school in Africa, went to high school in Africa, and one of his players he went to high school with ended up going to Cleveland State, and he's a Sudanese kid whose dad is the foreign affairs minister for South Sudan. So they were friends. So now it's years later, and this guy, Sudanese guy, calls up my friend and says, I got these 7-footers here. I'd like to see if I can get them out. He says, okay, I got a friend who I know is a real good coach. So he calls me up. He goes, how'd you like to have a 7-footer? I said, what are you talking about? I said, I'm a high school coach. You don't say that to me, right? So anyway, he put me in contact with this guy in Africa, and we talked. And he wanted to send me a lot of kids. And I said, how about we start with one and see how it works? So he sent me Jonathan, and then what we didn't know was Jonathan years before had applied to go to the United States as a refugee, and he got false fake ID and made himself older. And then 7 years later, he went to Kenya to apply to go to the United States to go to a school in Florida. He made himself younger. There was a group. I'm not going to mention the corporation that sponsored this. They tried to get a bunch of guys. They took a busload of guys to Kenya from Sudan, and he was one of them. I know this because my wife and I were investigated, and the U.S. Embassy investigator came to our house, and they explained all this to us. So anyway, 2 of the kids off that bus were declined, and one was Jonathan because he had applied earlier. So anyway, so he applied to come to Canada now through this guy Ding. He got through. When he arrived, he looked older. We questioned it. He had a real passport, he had a real birth certificate, and he had immunization records. So the school board said, we got to take him to the Canadian Border Services let him in. Yeah. So we got to take him. So when I took him to the embassy in Toronto to try and get him to get a U.S. visa, because we play a lot of games in the States, and right away they flagged him. But they didn't tell me this. And they brought us back, they separated us, and they started grilling me. And I thought, okay, something's wrong. I had something, something's wrong, but they didn't tell me what it was. They kept saying, we think his ID, da-da-da. Then in April, it all blew up. And that's when we found out the truth. And that's when we found out that they knew in December what was really going on, but they were investigating the whole situation, and they blew it up in April.
So it took you guys crossing the border for that?
No, we never. No, that's not true.
Attempting. Sorry.
No, the Windsor Star said that, but that is not true.
Oh.
How they caught us was when I took him to the U.S. Embassy in Toronto, and they fingerprinted him. They knew instantly who he was. That's how they knew who he was, because he had 2 previous applications into the United States. Jonathan didn't clue in that all the embassy in Syria, the embassy in Kenya, and the embassy in Toronto all have the same database.
Yeah, and they're all.
So as soon as the lady told me, as soon as they put his thumb down on that fingerprint, we knew exactly who he was. They were trying to figure out, how did he get into Canada, and how did he get in with me? How did he end up here with me? And the Canadian Border Services told him, if you had come here to go to St. Clair College or university, we'd have no problem. But we can't have somebody your age in a high school.
Of course. Of course.
So that was the whole issue. Was he was in a high school? Luckily he was a gentleman, and but he didn't cause any problems.
Yeah, exactly.
But I looked like a horse's ass because of it.
Of course, yeah. There's something else on there I wanted to bring up, that the Windsor Star had implied that he wasn't aware of his own age or something, which obviously that is true. Or?
It's true to a point. So he didn't know his exact age, but he knew approximately how old he was.
Mm-hmm. But he knew he was older than.
Yeah, absolutely. He knew he was older
than what.
Yeah, but he didn't know his exact. And that happens to, like I taught you at Catholic Central. So what happens is a kid is born. They're not born in a hospital. When the mother wants to take him to school, they go to the village chief and say, "Okay, he wants to go to school. Okay, when was he born? 5 years ago." So they put January 1st. Here's the year. The mother takes him to the school, and they start, and so that's why a lot of these kids don't have the ID. So they get ID later. So they take them to the school and say, here's his birthday, and that's how it all starts for a lot of these kids. It's not like here you're born in a hospital and it's recorded. It's,
Yeah, that makes sense. That's I understand that. Like, obviously we know the exact.
So he didn't know the exact age.
Yeah, but I mean, there's like a 15-year gap in there.
But he knew within a year how old he was.
Okay. And the other thing, like you had even mentioned, like he shows up, he looks older, but since he has all the paperwork,
Well, and not only that, what happened was when he arrived, Greg's, the guy who was the NBA scout, his father passed away a couple days before this, so they're having a funeral, and of course, because his mother was ambassador to Tanzania, a lot of Africans came over to the funeral. And I called Greg up. I said, Greg, he looks older. So he called me back the next day, and he said, I was talking to these people at the funeral, and they were saying that it's not the exact words. It's not unlikely for a kid to look 30 years old in a Sudanese high school because of the sun and because of this, it's a shithole country, and da da da. So I looked at some of the Sudanese kids that we had here, especially the parents, how much older they looked. So I kind of dismissed it, but
because I mean, for the most part, like everything, it does make sense.
Yeah.
But the things that I looked at was, how does he not? Again, a couple years difference, but 15-year gap in there. Like, he's got to know. And is no one like cluing in around the school? That's when it happened. That's why I was like, those were my two questions.
Yeah, and so I asked when the shit hit the fan. I asked the people at the board. I said, because they came in and investigated him too.
Of course.
So they have no right to say no to him. So imagine the backlash they would have got if they told an African kid, you're not going to school here, and he had all the ID. So the Canadian Border Services, once they accept that student, the board office can't say, no, we're not taking them. They have to take them. We have ESL kids all over the place, and we don't know the exact ages. Yeah. Actually, after that happened, one of my students from a Vietnamese kid, he said, sir, I don't let you know my age isn't my age either. My parents went and got me fake ID, but it cost them like $50. It's real ID, government ID, but it costs us $50. You just bribe somebody at the office in their countries, and they get ID. So
yeah, it's crazy. It really is crazy. And since then, he went back, right? Or,
no, I think he's in Alberta right now.
Is he?
Yeah.
Crazy, man.
They didn't send him back. He didn't do anything illegal.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't a criminal case. It was just the fact that he was in high school, and then because he played basketball, he was high profile.
Yeah, and it flags the whole investigation even more, right? Well, that is some good time, but that was I wasn't gonna say.
And that was my last year teaching too.
Oh, that's the case. That's the thing. Because remember, like we were talking before, and then researching today, I see the picture, and I'm like, oh yeah. And you retired 2016, so I'm like, oh, I wonder if he was there or not.
Yeah, I was there. So what happened was I was gonna retire the year before, but we were hosting the All Ontario Championships that year. So I thought, okay, I'll hang on one more year, and then that summer, that's when my buddy called me up, and
Wow,
anyway.
it's like a domino effect almost.